Welcome to Tony's outdoor camping channel. If you like the content that I produce, then please feel free to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification button, and I hope that you will join us again for more videos. Now, in this video, I'm going to address feet. Not so much caring for feet, although indirectly caring for feet. Socks, trail shoes, sealskin socks. 15 years ago, when I was, probably even more than that actually, but at least 15 years ago when I was walking, I got the biggest, heaviest, chunkiest, most waterproof boots that I could find. Scarpa SLs and various other waterproof boots, because I was terrified of getting wet feet. Wet feet syndrome. I was following different people on social media and things like that, and I actually discovered that wet feet, they don't matter. In fact, wet feet are probably more comfortable than big heavy boots, certainly outside of when it's really freezing cold. So I just want to encourage people, and I'll keep this as short as I can, not to worry about wet feet. Nothing's going to happen to your feet, to you, if you have wet feet, frankly, all day long. Your feet will be fine. Our feet are waterproof. Obviously, they may become more prone to blisters when they're softer and wetter, but frankly, the more walking that we do, the less that is of a problem. So just embrace wet feet. Now, I'll give you a few tips. You can get foot creams and anti-abrasion things like that if you have problems with blisters. And what I used to do, because I'm not doing so much walking now, it's not really a problem, but what I used to do when I used to get hot spots and blisters was I'd get some surgical spirit and cotton wool, and just at home for several days just dab surgical spirit onto that area, or generally even my whole feet, just to try and harden them up a little bit. And I found that worked quite well. I don't know whether anybody still does that these days, but certainly for me, back in the day when I was walking more, that certainly helped. And like I said, I also used to put some anti-friction cream or something like that on hot spots, and that also helped. But generally speaking, I didn't need to bother with that. When I was walking a lot, my feet just got used to wet feet, and blisters, generally speaking, were few and far between. If you are going to try it, make sure that you get mesh type of shoes. Innovates, plenty of shoes have a good deal of mesh on them. Don't get a leather boot or a waterproof boot, or shoe I should say, and then go and get wet feet, because if you have a leather shoe, the water's not really going to get out, and you're going to be sloshing around in water inside your shoe. So get a good mesh or very, 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 very breathable shoe. Innovates have been my go-to choice for a very, very long time now. I think La Sportiva do a mesh type of shoe, and plenty of other shoe manufacturers do mesh type of shoe. You just want a shoe that the water can get out of quite quickly. It doesn't have to be all mesh. It can have some synthetic or some leather in it, but try and get one that has as much mesh as possible. The other advantage of that, of course, is they tend to be quite lightweight, and that's also a bonus. Socks, I like merino. These are smart wool. So, but a merino sock I find is very good. Now, one tip that I picked up when it comes to socks, and this is something I learned a long time ago, I've got a size 9 or 43 shoe, foot thing. And in the very early days of walking, before I was camping, a long time before I was camping, I used to buy a large sock. And I was thinking, my foot is a size 9. Let's get the size 9 to 10, 9 to 12 or something like that. Thinking the sock might shrink or something like that. But actually the opposite happens. I find that when I had a sock that was too big, it would get too baggy, and when it gets too baggy, of course, it then becomes a friction hazard, i.e. blisters. So a merino sock sized down is a good idea to get. So if you've got a size 9 shoe and the sock only goes up to 8 or 8.5, I would be inclined to go for the 8 and the 8.5, or up to the nearest to your foot size. And don't forget, when we buy shoes, our feet fit into a size 9 shoe, for example, which means our feet are probably more like 8.5, 8 3/4 or something like that. I could be talking nonsense when I'm not a foot expert, but I've just found that sizing down is a good idea when it comes to socks. When you get into camp, now again, because I camp alone, it's not really it's not really a problem for me, because I get into camp and the first thing I do is set everything up and pretty much get into the sleeping bag. So if I've got wet feet from the day, then of course I can take my shoes and socks off, dry my socks off, or dry my feet. Then I can take my shoes and socks off, dry my feet, and pretty much get into bed. And I usually, and I always do, this is the first trip ever that I forgot, I always bring a pair of merino liner socks. You could bring any kind of sock really, but I just want something that's quite loose fitting but comfortable and warm. So I put those on when I get into the sleeping bag. One, it just helps protect the inside of the sleeping bag. Two, it keeps my feet just a little extra cozy. So I always have a pair of liner socks to wear inside the sleeping bag. Now, of course, when you're in camp, or maybe you're with friends or something like that, you're thinking, oh no, I've got wet shoes and soaking wet socks. This is where sealskin socks really are useful. Now, even if you've got an old pair that leak, it doesn't matter. And these are actually a bit too small. I sized down on these, but actually they're a bit too small. So sealskin socks, you might just want to check the size. But again, if you're just getting them as I do now, pretty much for in camp wear, again, size, comfort, as long as they're not, horrendously uncomfortable, it doesn't really matter. Put your sealskin sock on, and then you can put your wet shoes on. Now, some moisture may very well get through that, and onto the foot, but that will keep your feet reasonably warm and reasonably dry while you nip to the loo, while you're outside chatting to friends for an hour or two. And then of course when you finish, you just get into camp, get in your sleeping bag, make sure your feet are still dry, and then overnight, I'm not saying that your socks will be dry in the morning, of course they're not going to be, but overnight, just lay your socks out flat somewhere, and if your sealskin's got a little bit damp, again, just lay them out flat somewhere, and they'll be a tiny bit drier in the morning, probably not very much. Of course, the next morning, when you wake up and your socks are cold and wet, now I will admit that that's not the nicest feeling in the world, is in the morning, you've packed everything away, and then you go and put those wet socks on, and they're usually a bit wet, a bit cold. I will say it's a pretty manky experience. But honestly, once you've put your wet socks on and you've put them into your shoes and you've done that final bit of packing and you start walking, your feet will warm up quite quickly. If it's dry and you're walking in a dry area, your feet will naturally just dry everything out relatively quickly. You'll find within, as long as you don't stand in any puddles or anything like that, or your foot doesn't drop into a bog, or you don't cross a river, but you'll probably find that within a couple of hours your feet will actually have dried your shoes and socks out to a large degree. Of course, the opposite may be you may have to do a river crossing straight away or something like that. So, or just you got your camp near in a boggy area. So again, if your shoes and socks are already damp, well, it doesn't matter because you're going to get them soaked again within the next however long it is. So I just encourage people, whoever watches my video, this was supposed to be a short 2 or 3 minute go and get your feet wet video, just to embrace, you know, trail shoes, trail runners. You might find that trail shoes and approach shoes aren't necessarily the ones to go for. You might be better off looking for a trail runner because they tend to be lighter and much more breathable. You know, you see these runners, you know, running across areas of landscape, you know, in the lightest of shoes. They don't worry about wet feet or something like that. So, okay, they're not carrying heavy packs and things like that, but just embrace wet feet. And like I said, just be prepared when you get into camp, take your wet shoes and socks off, lay them out flat somewhere if you can, dry your feet off and get into bed with nice, warm, cozy, dry socks. Or if you need to go to the loo or chat with friends, just have some sealskin socks. You don't have to go for the big heavy duty ones. See, this is the lightest pair that I could find. Like I said, they're even a bit small for me. And it's just something that you can just put on. So when you're mingling around camp or something like that, you're not in wet feet, you know, in the evening. So like I said, you know, if you've got wet feet during the day, it doesn't matter because for the next 10 or 12 hours plus, you're going to have dry feet or relatively dry feet. So your feet will be fine. Don't worry about wet feet. Go and get wet feet and enjoy the experience. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, all that other stuff below. Just check out the Amazon affiliate links, please. Just buy something of your own via one of those links would be helpful. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.